Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderful Gaming. In today's video we're going to look at getting started with the Sylvaneth in Warhammer Age of Sigmar using the 2025 Holiday Battle Force box set, the Outcast Spikegrove. In the video we'll look to give you a brief overview of who the Sylvaneth are, the basic army rules, and then look to use the box set as an initial starting point, and throughout the video look to other units to use and expand upon that initial box set, finishing off the video with a fleshed out 1000 point army list for you to use in your games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. The Sylvaneth are the servants of life created by Alarielle. This term encompasses a range of different creatures first created when Alarielle planted the seeds in the realm of Ghyran during the Age of Myth. Since then they have multiplied, and while they remain at their strongest in the realm of life, they have spread to the other mortal realms as well. After Alarielle was awakened by Sigmar, she wandered alone through the wilds of Ghyran for a very long time, exploring its lands and wonders and spoke with its many plants and creatures. She desired no companions and found solace in nature alone, nurturing life as she went along her way. But eventually she grew tired of her solitude and sowed her most treasured artifacts, seeds she had kept from the world that was. These seeds gave birth to the first of the Sylvaneth, growing into different creatures depending on the condition of the sowing. Under her guidance, these nature spirits grew to maturity. After their creation, she thanked Sigmar properly, joined his pantheon, and shared the gifts of life magic with the other realms. Sylvaneth quickly spread out and became the rulers of a large part of the realm of Ghyran. They lived in harmony with nature and most of the mortal tribes of the Jade Kingdoms. The noble spirits destroyed threats like greenskin hordes, hostile barbarian tribes, and rampaging beasts, while the forest folk nurtured the land and lived in peace. Thanks to their work, Ghyran bloomed, and many natural wonders blossomed like they had never before. They went further and spread throughout the other mortal realms to make enclaves. However, travelling outside of Ghyran was dangerous for them as they ran the risk of being cut off from the Spirit Song. Many Sylvaneth thus fled back to Ghyran or went mad. Those who endured sought out hotspots of life magic like verdant glens or waterfalls to build their settlements. They planted soulpod groves and sowed new realm roots. These enclaves took many forms, like simple clearings known as the Heartglades, great halls made out of twisted limbs and boughs, or dwellings sculpted into the cliff face behind cascading waterfalls. Some of these enclaves that grew during the time were the Hunter's Moon, the Singing Mountains, and the city caverns of Briardale. And so, before we get on to looking at what is in the initial box set, we're going to look at the Sylvaneth army rules. Now, the Sylvaneth have a few special rules that are unique to them, the first of these being Endless Growth. This is a once per turn army ability used at the end of any turn, so this is both yours and your opponent's turns, so it activates twice over the course of a battle round. What this does is you pick any number of friendly Sylvaneth units, hold within 6 inches of any friendly Awakened Wildwoods to be the targets, and each of them gets to heal D3. This is a pretty cool rule where you can get some decent healing on a bunch of your different units. Now, Strike and Fade is our second one, and once per turn army, end of any turn, we get to pick a Sylvaneth unit that is in combat and hold within 6 inches of a friendly Awakened Wildwood. Remove that unit from the battlefield, set it up anywhere more than 9 inches from all enemy units, and hold within 6 inches of a different friendly Awakened Wildwood. This is a really cool ability, as placing your Wildwoods can be really important for your force, enabling you to sort of get some of your slower moving pieces over onto other places of the battlefield where you need them. It's important to remember this is once per turn armies, so this means you can only use this once for your whole army, not once per model, for example. Now, the last one we have is Walk the Hidden Path. This is once per turn army during your movement phase again, so the same restrictions as the one we just talked about. You pick a friendly Sylvaneth unit that's not in combat, hold within 6 inches of an Awakened Wildwoods, remove them from the battlefield and set up again more than 9 inches away from all enemy units and 6 inches of a friendly different Wildwood. Now, this is pretty cool as well. It does allow you to make a second move with a different Sylvaneth unit. The big difference here being that this one is during your movement phase, while the other one is during the end of any turn. So this will essentially give you 3 teleports throughout the course of the turn. Today's video is sponsored by Gap Games, a fantastic miniature wargaming store in Queensland, Australia. They stock a wide variety of miniature wargames from all things Games Workshop to some of my personal favourites, Conquest, The Last Argument of Kings, and all things Modifius wargames as well. Use our affiliate code in the link below to help support both this fantastic store and the channel as well. And so, looking at what comes in the initial box set, and the first model we have is Drycha Hammerdreth. Drycha is a named character or unique character for the Sylvaneth. This means that you can only include one of this model in your army. Pretty cool that you get it here in this giant box. She's a cool centerpiece model to lead your force. Now, she's got a pretty solid stat line. She's on that sort of lower echelon of monster creatures in the game. 10 wounds, a 3+ save. Movement 9 is really nice and slightly faster than average of what you would expect for most monsters. But that's also a stat that's not necessarily always apparent with Sylvaneth, because obviously we have ways to move about the battlefield in lots of different ways. Now, she's got a bunch of different attacks that generally are going to focus on taking on enemy infantry, with a lot of anti-infantry +1 rend on her combat. She's also got shooting combat with a rather average shooting attack, though it does have 10 attacks on it. Now, her big thing is she's going to work nice in concert with your Spite Revenants or Twist Wield unit. Now, we do get Spite Revenants inside the box, and we'll talk about them in just a little bit. But her Song of Spite is a spell where she can target an enemy unit, and then you get to add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Sylvaneth units that target that unit. However, if they're a Spite Revenant unit, they also get +1 to wound. So +1 to hit and wound on a unit that you've cast this in when Drycha is going in as well. It's pretty nice. Her big special rule herself, though, is a mercurial aspect. This allows her to sort of pick whether she's enraged or embittered, and it benefits sort of boosting up either one of her 2 attacking profiles. Now, other than that, she is a Wizard 1 as well, so you're going to get access to some magic in your force. This is, of course, going to make sure that you want to grab manifestations down the line, another thing we'll talk about later in the video. And so, then on to the aforementioned Spite Revenants. These are the vast majority of models you get inside the initial box set, along with one of the other basic sort of infantry types. But the cool thing about this kit is it is a dual kit with the Tree Revenants. We'll talk about them next after this, but Spite Revenants are sort of a lot of attacks. Make up for not having that grade of attacks is sort of their whole thing. Quantity over quality. Now, they are relatively frail. 2 wounds and a 5+ save is not that tough at all. However, they are relatively cheap points cost at the time of recording. You do have crit mortal on your attacks, meaning every time you roll a 6 to hit with your attacks, you're going to do mortal damage instead, which ignores enemies' armor. And your Embridled Malice special rule means you can pick an enemy infantry unit and potentially stop them being able to use commands as well with this ability, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have Tree Revenants. Now, this is the alternate build option for Spite Revenants. It actually doesn't show any of these on the initial box, it just shows a bunch of Spite Revenants, but I definitely do recommend building up some Tree Revenants. The big reason I definitely recommend one of these units is their Waypiper's Dance ability. This is a really powerful ability for allowing you to have a good board control and access to sort of take an objective off an opponent or do a thing with your unit here that your opponent's not expecting if they leave, like a wizard, unprotected, a low sort of wound character, something that's not going to, survive on its own. Really cool unit to have access to. Waypiper's Dance is a once per turn army ability, so this means that only 1 unit of Tree Revenants in your whole army can do this, so you definitely don't want to stock up on too many, at least in your initial points. Maybe when you go to higher points you have some redundancy there. But the effect of this is you get to remove the unit from the battlefield and then literally set them up anywhere 9 inch away from all enemy units on the battlefield again. This is really cool. A super powerful ability. Free teleport is, for the points cost you're paying on this unit, incredibly good. And this will be a unit that, while they might not do an awful lot in combat, they will definitely win you games by the amount of points they can score. And so, moving on to the other sort of half of our big infantry blob that makes up the box, and this is the Dryads. Dryads are another basic infantry, though they are only 1 wound infantry, so much more multitudinous than our other units. 5+ save, though, is nice. But their big thing, they've got 2 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rent, damage 1. Blessings of the Forest, though, make them a relatively good defensive unit. They're cheap enough that their points cost is going to allow you to take lots of them for what they're worth. The Blessing of the Forest ability is a passive ability where they're just subtracting 1 from the hit and wound rolls for attacks that target this unit while they're hollow within 6 inches of any forest. This would be really cool because if you can place your forest right, say near enough to objectives, near enough to sort of vital points in the battlefield, it's going to be a really hard unit to shift. -1 to hit, okay, that's easily countered by a lot of +1 to hit access in the game. But -1 to wound is a really big debuff, and there's not an awful lot of things in the game that give out +1 to wound. Lastly, inside the box set, we get the Treeman kit, and we're going to specifically talk about the Spirit of Durthu. This is the model that's shown on the box. I think this is the coolest looking of all the Treeman. It's got a giant sword, it's got that sort of half shattered face. It's a shard of a former great Treeman that used to live in the world that was. 14 health, 3+ save, 5-inch move, control 5. Once again, like Drycha Hammerdreth, it's on that sort of lighter end of monsters, sort of almost tipping into that middle class of them. It's got a shooting attack, which is actually damage 2, Venom Blast with 5 attacks. It's decent enough, it will hurt some enemy infantry, but really this model is all about the damage it can do in combat. Anti-monster on its Guardian Sword, which is Ren 2, damage 5, going up obviously to Ren 3, where that anti against monsters is really cool. And the massive Impaling Talon with crit mortal on a couple of attacks. If this spikes, I've rolled double 6s with it before, it can really sort of swing battles. Definitely not something to be reliant on, but it can be a big swingy piece. You've got a couple of cool abilities. First of all, the Wrathful Guardian allows you to get better while you're near forest. This just gives you +1 to hit while you're near your Awakened Wildwoods. A cool ability to have. Yes, you can get +1 to hit in other ways, obviously from like all out attack, but you don't get the negatives here. You also, don't have to spend the command point to get this ability if you can line it up properly. The Titanic Jewel is the monster's Rampage. You pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit on a 3+, you subtract 1 from their attack characteristic of all their melee weapons. This is pretty cool because it does target all of the melee weapons. So this can be really useful when, say, going into a model that's got lots of different profiles with maybe not that many attacks on each of them. Dropping them all down definitely decreases the amount of damage those things are going to do to you. It's also a hero as well, so it's going to lead a second regiment, which does open up options when you start building your force out later, as you will have 2 characters here in the initial box set to build out your force with. And so where to go next? The cool thing about this box set is we do have 1,000 points pretty much right out the get-go, so we only need to grab those sort of ancillary products to build up our force. And the first of these is of course going to be Awakened Wildwoods. You are going to want to pick up a couple of these. You probably don't need more than 2 at most when you're playing 1,000 point games. You may need to pick up another one if you start increasing the size of your games, or 2 potentially, on how sort of many points you go to. But Awakened Wildwoods are your faction terrain. These have some basic sort of terrain rules. First of all, cover, unstable and obscuring. So you just sort of got to look at where you're placing models on them. But you get to deploy Wildwoods during the course of the game. You set this terrain feature up hollow within your territory, 3 inch from all objectives. And your growing woods means each time you set up an Awakened Wildwood, you can place 1 to 3 scenery pieces. And so these are sort of the little crescent moon shapes that the trees make up. Connect them however you want, and this does increase sort of the range of friendly abilities that require friendly models to be hollow within 6 inch if you do increase them, and also add to the health characteristic of the model. Now, the 2 sort of abilities we get from this, first of all, is Overgrown Wilderness, where enemy units are visible to friendly Sylvaneth units, even if every model in that enemy unit is within 1 inch of this terrain feature. In addition, the range characteristic of friendly Sylvaneth units' ranged weapons is not halved, while every model in that friendly unit is within 1 inch of this terrain feature. So you sort of get none of the negatives and all the benefits of this type of terrain because it's your terrain. Vengeful Forest Spirits is the other one, where you can sort of hurt enemy units that wander into your forest. So if they do go try to attack your forest and take them off the table, if they don't kill them, they're going to suffer some damage for it. All in all, these become an integral part of sort of how a Sylvaneth army wants to work. A lot of your army abilities, a lot of your war scrolls have abilities that work on them, like we saw with the Spirit of Durthu, and all of your sort of war, painted paths and all that all really works. They are an important and integral part of the army. I don't think there's any other army in Age of Sigmar that quite uses terrain like Sylvaneth does. And so, moving on, we then have the Gladeworm. This is the first of the manifestations we're going to talk about for the Sylvaneth here. Now, the Gladeworm is, as it will look, a giant worm. This is going to have some decent damage sort of going into enemy wizards is the big thing with anti-wizard +1 Ren, so Ren 2 on wizards, pretty cool. Now, while you might think of that, you might go, well, most wizards only have a 6+ save. It's not that important. Remembering that a lot of big models, we have one in our force, Drycha, and lots of things like that are wizards. So a lot of your big heroes in the game are wizard heroes. So this is going to be really cool to sort of get some extra damage into them. The Barrier Below ability means if this manifestation is not in combat, you can remove it from the battlefield and set it up 9-inch from all non-wizard units, more than 3-inch from all enemy wizards. This is pretty cool because it does allow you to sort of pretty much guarantee you're going to get a charge in with this thing, which is really cool. And then your Feed on Eldritch Energy ability means you pick an enemy wizard in combat with a manifestation and they are subtracting 1 from casting and binding and banishment. Another cool sort of ability, if your wizard does manage to survive and doesn't actually take this thing out, it's going to be reducing sort of all their rolls, including the rolls that your opponent has to make to try and get rid of it. After that, we then have the Spite Swarm Hive. Now, this is a stationary terrain piece that we have. It doesn't move around the battlefield. And what this does is it has an ability where it can sort of buff up the stuff around it. The Hive Nourishes allows you to pick a friendly Sylvaneth unit within 3 inches of the manifestation. And you roll a dice on a 2+, either get +1 to run and charge, or a ward of 6+ on the unit. A cool little buff, nothing too fancy here. Definitely going to help, I think, with some of your more defensive units. They're going to sit on home objectives. I'm looking at like Dryads potentially getting a ward 6+, but also on some of your units that can get benefits from various different ways. We have lots of bonuses to move in some aspects of the army. Being able to get a +1 to charge and move around can be a really nice benefit. And then lastly, for manifestations, we have the Vengeful Skullroot. The Vengeful Skullroot is another manifestation that's going to move around the table. It's what's called a predatory one. And this has, first of all, a couple of abilities. First of all, Creeping Willow. This manifestation counts as an Awakened Wildwood for the purposes of Endless Growth, Walk the Hidden Path, and Strike and Fade. So, really cool. This allows you to sort of teleport your units from this. It's a mobile piece you can use to pair it with some of the creatures that maybe move around. I'm thinking Spirit of Durthu can be really cool with this, just sort of following on its trail, enabling Durthu to always get that +1 to hit. We've also got Vengeful Terrors as well, where you pick an enemy unit within 3 inches, subtract an amount of the target's control score equal to the number of friendly units that have been destroyed this battle. So the more of your stuff that sort of gets destroyed, the more this is going to hurt your enemy's control. So another cool sort of piece that can definitely help out with monsters. I think pairing this with Durthu is probably how I'd like to go, but also does open up the teleporting for other units. You know, if you need to get Spite Revenants and Drycha where they need to be, sort of jumping from this to somewhere else is a really good use of it as well. And so, for our sample army list today, we are using the Forest Folk Battle Formation. This gives us Lacerating Strike, a passive ability where we get to add one to the Ren characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Sylvaneth non-Kanothi infantry. So this is our Dryad Revenants, our Spite Revenants, and our Tree Revenants in the force. So our first regiment is going to have the regimental leader as Drycha Hammondras, who will be our army's general. Moving into units, we then have our Dryads and Spite Revenants, both of which have been reinforced, and then a unit of Tree Revenants as well. Well, in our second regiment, as just a second regimental leader, the Spirit of Durthu, with the artifact power, the Glamour Weave, that allows the model to reroll a hit, wound, and save roll each turn. And then the heroic trait of Warsing, you're going to boost up some movement, a cool thing to sort of buff up when we're looking at sort of maybe combining with the Spite Swarm Hive and stuff like that. We hope this video was helpful in getting you started with Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and it was able to give you some ideas and inspiration to start your own force in the game. If you have any other questions at all, please comment down below, and while you're there, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and join our Discord server to check out all our future Warhammer Age of Sigmar content.